Hi and welcome to Kitchen Conversation with Sterling and Lisa. And today we're going to talk about allergens, a fast-moving subject, Lisa. Today is October the 16th and practically things are changing quicker than Brexit at the moment.
Well, in fact, this is Allergencast because I think it's just going to keep going on. It's the gift that keeps on giving. So I think, really seriously, we're going to be talking about this for some time to come. And what I feel is happening is that we're getting a lot of knee-jerk reactions going on. We've got the knee-jerk reaction legislation. And then we've got other things going on which are really, really worrying me. So, for example, I'm seeing letters from enforcement officers that don't really make sense. I've seen a notice which doesn't seem to have any legal status, all to do with allergens, and everybody's trying to make it up as they go along. And what I'm really worried about is that what we might end up with is a lot of people doing the wrong thing and making it more unsafe.
Yeah, because at the moment, especially after the tragic death of Natasha, which kind of resonated with everyone, people are trying to do the right thing. That's the frustrating thing. Yeah. Everybody's got a common objective. Yeah. But I got that concern that you've got. If we're not careful in our rush to do the right thing, we actually might make the whole situation more unsafe. And I got a concern that maybe that's what Natasha's law will do, is in its drive to do this labelling, perhaps it's overlooked the fact that the vast majority of people do this will be micro businesses, small businesses, and simply won't have the capacity to ensure that all their products are labelled correctly.
No, that's right. And it looks now as though the scope is going to be much greater than was originally thought, because basically what was an exemption, which was prepacked foods for direct sale in the previous legislation, is now in the new legislation the thing that actually requires people to have a full label and to have allergen information. So it's actually reversed its status. And that means that something that excluded a lot of people is now by default including a lot of people. And they weren't actually expecting this to happen. So the sorts of people that it's including are those people who are having packed food on the other side of the counter. So the allergic customer can't even read the label that's going to be required on that food before they make the choice of what to eat. And that really does worry me, because what's the point of a label if the person who's doing the choosing can't see the label before they make the choice?
Because the whole thing isn't about dialogue. I think when there's a dialogue between the business and the customer, I think it works, because then you can start asking questions and the business can be aware that they're dealing with somebody that might have an allergic reaction, has that potential. Whereas if you take that dialogue away and just simply rely on the label, I wonder if that is a more unsafe situation. And when people talk about allergen management, everyone focuses actually not on labelling. If you go to a factory and you actually see what do you spend your time doing on allergen management, 90% of it is avoiding cross-contamination and cleaning. But that's not where the cases are going wrong. Where the case is going wrong, where the withdrawals are, is simply the right product in the wrong pack or using the right pack for the wrong product. And then when you get that under declaration of allergens, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think with this, if we're not careful, people aren't appreciating it's the labelling of food which is the real danger. That's where you have to put your focus in, not into making sure, well, I've cleaned that surface down.
Okay. Well, the two things are very important. And one of the problems, I think people are still not aware of the consequences of what's actually going to happen to their businesses. But, when you're putting a label on a packet of a sandwich, for example, you're not just going to put bread, margarine, cheese. You're going to actually have to break down those ingredients. And a lot of people I'm speaking to sort of think the bread is the ingredient, but it isn't, because there are many, many ingredients within the bread which could have allergens in, which need to be declared. And the allergen, if it's gluten, for example, you actually have to say which cereal the gluten has come from as well. So there's a huge amount of technical information that is actually going to be needed on that label in a small establishment.
And I think that's the trouble, isn't it? Is that if you look at the catering industry, it's a very transient industry. A lot of the food handlers aren't the best paid. They're not always the best educated.
No.
And people who have got degrees in food science struggle to get this right. And you really think for those, mom and pop operations where there might be 2 or 3 people in a small sandwich place, how will they have that capability?
Well, I I think the problem is that they may not have the capability. They would have the capability though if somebody went up to them and said, "Can you tell me what's in this sandwich?"
Yeah.
Because what would happen then is they would go back and they say, "Right, well, let's get the bread out. We'll look at the packet.
Yeah.
Let's get the other ingredients out. We'll look at the packet. We've actually produced a matrix because we need to do that anyway under the food information regulations." But we can double check it with that allergic customer. And then there's a dialogue as well which says, well, how important is it that there isn't even a trace of this allergen in the food? We can go back and then look at the may contains. Because, of course, the food information regulations only give us the ingredients in the food, not what could be contaminating the food. And people are either allergic to the ingredient, if it's in the food, or they could be allergic to a very small trace of it. And that needs to be information that the business has as well. For the two people to make that risk assessment, that's not going to come out of a label on a food in a sandwich shop. So I do feel really, really worried that this is not going to work. And
well, perhaps it will go the other way. Do you think it will go the way that everyone will do defensive labelling?
Of course.
So to get round it, people say, I'll do my risk assessment.
Yeah.
Well, the simple thing is I'll put may contain on all my labels, and therefore what you end up doing is people have that kind of potential allergic reaction. You're taking away all their choice because everyone's going to say, well, you can't eat anything in this establishment because we can't guarantee there's allergens in any of the food.
But that is actually quite true. In a small catering kitchen, there will be probably all the allergens included in some meal or other. You can't have an allergen-free kitchen because there's hundreds of different foods that people are allergic to. So the truth is that anything could have a may contains unless the business knows when they've had that dialogue, and then they could actually make something in a safe environment for that particular allergen. So this leads me on to the other things. We're starting to see requests for controls from enforcement officers that quite honestly show a lack of understanding of how this could actually work in practice. So what I'm seeing is a request for separate utensils to be available for people to use to make a meal free of a particular allergen. Now, what is the point of that? Because every time they get a request, they're going to have to use utensils which could have been used for another allergen. If you, for example, go down the route of the purple chopping board and everything else, which allergen has been on there last? The only control really is to have effective cleaning and disinfection, and that's really where we need to be focusing on, not having fancy different coloured boards for allergens, because there are so many allergens. If you make a sandwich out of normal bread with egg, the next person who comes along who's gluten-free you'll have to have washed that board. If they're allergic to egg, you will have had to wash that board. So, immediately have many different boards. Is that going to work? It isn't. Everybody, when you start to explain why that won't work, gets it. But we're seeing letters to businesses saying, do this, do that. And, everybody's really confused.
But I think isn't that the issue? You mentioned the enforcement officers, but there are hardly any of them left after kind of decimation. So who is going to enforce this legislation? And at the moment, I wonder, hopefully the FSA will be producing guidelines, but how's it going to work?
Well, there will be
that's
guidelines.
Going to be a biggest challenge as it is for industries.
Absolutely.
It's going to be for enforcement.
I mean, the only way that you can enforce a label on a food is to take a sample. Because how else would you know whether that information is accurate?
And the sampling budgets for most local authorities have disappeared in some authorities.
Yeah. I mean, there is talk that the sampling budget is going to be revised and it may come back. But the consumer will have this trust, this probably a false trust in the whole system, that somehow their allergy is being looked after by the business, by the enforcement officers, and they don't need to ask the questions. But of course, that is the only way to actually be safe. The other thing I've been seeing is all sorts of strange signs. So I saw one at an airport where they had a self-serve buffet. And they had tongs for each item on the buffet, which is good practice. But then they had a notice saying, can the customers please ensure that they keep the tongs in the right bowl? because that would otherwise put our allergic customers at risk. Now, quite frankly, if I were an allergic customer, I wouldn't ever dream of eating from something like that, because how can you trust that a previous customer has put the right tongs in the right place, or not dropped some food to which you're allergic into the bowl that you're just about to help yourself to? And we've got to be realistic. Those situations are actually not suitable for allergic people. Because the business doesn't know what your allergy is until you've arrived at the premises, and the previous customers could have done all sorts of mixing up. So that's a typical example of a business trying to do the right thing, but actually potentially making it much worse. That's what I'm worried about.
There's a lot of people who've got lots of questions, and we don't certainly have all the answers, so it would be great if we could set up a webinar and people have the opportunity to join us live and to ask their questions, or perhaps cover some of these subjects that we haven't thought of ourselves.
Yes, that's right. And we're also hoping to have a live kitchen conversation with the Royal Society for Public Health. And we have invited a lawyer who can give us a bit of a grilling as well, can't he? So that would be excellent. So we're going to keep you informed about that. But this is only the first of many Allergencasts, so look out for some more soon.
And hopefully you can join us with them.
Key points. There is no legal definition of prepacked food for direct sale. The FSA proposal of a definition of PPDS was food pre-packed for direct sale is food that is packed before being offered for sale to the consumer on the same premises or on the same site, or on other premises if the food is offered for sale from a movable and/or temporary premises such as marquees, market stalls, mobile sales vehicles. In practice, what this actually means is that all single-item packed foods in catering premises could be in scope. In our opinion, the new regulation is unsafe because it decreases dialogue. It gives a false sense of security. Customers may not double-check. Customers may not ask about cross-contact, and mistakes could happen. And also, for other allergenic foods not on the list, there would be no cross-contact information. This could lead to more incidents and deaths. The latest news is that there is an extension of the timeframe from the 1st of October to the end of December, so that more discussions can take place. We'll be updating you, so watch out for our next Allergencast.